Good morning to the DME for Peace community. Welcome to this week's edition of the M&E Thursday Talks. These Thursday Talk webinars on DME for Peace are made possible with the support of the Carnegie Corporation of New York through the Peacebuilding Evaluation Consortium. Just in case you've forgotten, my name is Jack Farrell and I'm the DME for Peace Project Manager at Search for Common Ground here in Washington, DC. Today, I'm delighted to welcome members of the Impact Project and specifically Kiche Magak, to discuss strengthening arts and conflict transformation through evaluation. A note about our format, which is a bit different from normal today. This is a community-wide consultation, so we really want to hear from you. We're going to kick off by speaking to Kiche for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we want to hear about your experience. You can offer your contributions throughout the webinar, either by writing a question in the question function or by clicking on the little hand icon on your GoToWebinar dashboard to raise your hand and allow us to unmute your microphone. But first, we just want to get a feel for today's audience with an interactive poll, and this should pop up in your screen in the next few moments. So if you could all answer this poll. Okay, we're still collecting responses. And with that, we're going to close today's poll. And now to bring back, oh, no. The joys of hosting a webinar, which is quite interactive. Thank you all for your contribution to today's poll. And now we're going to get things underway with our Q&A to really learn more about what the Impact Project is. And Kiche, you're very welcome to the Thursday Talks. I was wondering if you could start off by telling the audience here, what is Impact?
Thank you, Jack. Impact is imagining together platform for arts, culture, and conflicts transformation. It's quite a mouthful, so impact is a good way of putting the whole idea in brief.
Okay, and where did the idea come from?
Impact has been a culmination of a long process that took years. Actually, the process is still going on. And this is a process where individual artists, scholars, with some funders, individual organizations, both local and international. I could maybe just briefly talk about some of the landmarks of this process. One of the landmarks was a colloquium in Canada, in a place called Peter Wall Institute for Advanced Study, that is in UBC, University of British Columbia. That brought together a number of artists, scholars, and scholars both from art and other disciplines. I remember particularly neuroscience, which was a very interesting connection with art and peace building. There have also been a number of conventions. One of them was in Juniata College in the US. That also brought together funders, artists, scholars. Another one was a colloquium in South Africa, in Stellenbosch, in a place called Stellenbosch Institute for Advanced Studies. And also there have been a number of conferences and seminars. So it's been a long process. It's something that has been emerging over a period of years. And although Impact, I say it is a culmination, it is not a culmination of the whole process, because there are also other horns that are growing, but this is the one that is becoming solid at the moment. Yes.
Great. Thanks, Kiche. And building on it, that sort of those landmarks from the Impact Project, I was wondering if you could elaborate on what are some of the preliminary ideas for an infrastructure for the arts, for culture, and conflict transformation, and this field that is emerging.
Yes, thank you, Jack. Many things are coming up at the moment with impact. The team is actually still grappling with the final structure of the model, the model of the infrastructure. But at the moment, three have emerged very distinctly. The first one is membership organization. Should impact go for membership organization? The second one is centralized organization with a number of hubs globally. And the third one that is being considered is a number of working groups that also are located throughout the world. So these are emergent ideas. Part of the reason is that because impact brings people from different areas, artists, scholars, funders, and everybody else who identifies as an art person who is in social change in general, but specifically in conflict transformation, we are trying to come up with a structure that everybody feels some reasonable comfortability, if there's a phrase like that. So that is still going on. And we believe sooner than later, we are going to come up with the final model of what the infrastructure should look like. But those are the three that are still under consideration at the moment.
Great. And Kichi, you're based in Kenya. And I was wondering, how could your country and the East African region on a whole benefit from such a global infrastructure?
Yeah, many ways actually. Maybe I'll just mention a few. Artists, particularly in this region, work under very difficult circumstances. You know, there's a lot of censorship, there's a lot of oppression, if you will. There's no political will to support what they are doing. Some of the organizations that work in peace building do not even consider art as a serious partner in peace building. So I think one main thing that the region may benefit is just the very concept of legitimacy, that this is something that is not only done in Kenya and the East African region, this is something that is happening globally. And again, I don't really think this is a Kenyan or an East African thing, it is a global thing, but this region will particularly benefit from that kind of infrastructure. Secondly, from my experience, the region is not very strong in documenting what is going on. There's a lot of intervention programs that are running. There are a lot of projects that are happening all over the place. However, these projects have hardly been documented. Infrastructure like that, I think, can help to build the capacity of the people who are in art and peace building or art and conflict transformation in the region to document the processes, document the projects that they're doing so that we can talk about replicability, you know, which is an important concept even in evaluation. The other thing would be, again, one of the major problems in the region is getting the funds to undertake these intervention projects of art and conflict transformation. So I think a group like that, an infrastructure like that can help the region, Kenya and the East African region, to source for funding outside and within, because even within the region, there are organizations that can fund some of these projects, but this funding would be made a lot easier if it is done within a global infrastructure which is internationally recognized. So I think funding, which is one of the biggest problems, would really benefit in this kind of infrastructure. And maybe lastly, so that I don't go too long, is training capacity building. A lot of people in this region who are involved in art, culture, and conflict transformation are doing this thing out of their hearts. You know, it is just something that they love to do and they see the need for it. I think an infrastructure like that can give the region an opportunity to develop their skills, develop their capacity so that they can do what they're already doing in a way that can have a lot more impact. I'm not saying they do not have impact now, they do, except I think they can have more impact if their capacities are built and they do this in a conscious way of how to, go bigger. Yeah, I think I would end there. Like I say, there are a number of ways that the region can benefit.
Great, thank you, Kiche. And I think the funding issue is something a lot of the people working in peace building, working in sort of any community-based work is something that resonates with everyone. And just as a final question, really, before we turn over to the audience, I want to hear a little bit about the design differences. Like how different is it designing a pure peace building program versus an arts-based peace building program? And do you see any particular challenges of evaluation when it comes to arts-based peace building initiatives? For example, applying traditional evaluation protocols. And I believe you may be muted, Kiche. Not. Okay, well, it looks like we have lost Kiche. I'm going to call on Tony Shapiro-Fim. Tony, if you could unmute your microphone, it would be great to sort of just have your input. Tony is also a sort of a representative from Impact, who was online just in case Kiche's internet or power dropped in Kenya. And Tony is based in a slightly more reliable internet area in Philadelphia. So Tony, you're very welcome to the Thursday Talks. And I was wondering if you might be able to discuss the differences in designing peace building programs versus arts-based peace building programs, and the challenges of evaluation when it comes to arts-based peace building initiatives.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Jack. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm on the steering committee for the Impact Initiative. I'd like to address the part of the question that goes to evaluation. Of course, in any the development and implementation of any evaluation protocol and project, there are lots of complexities, and when arts are involved, there's also the question of arts and other areas of involvement as well. There's the question of balance between qualitative and quantitative evaluation. When people are considering not only what to evaluate, what are they looking for the evaluation to help them do afterwards? Is it to better their own practice, or to answer questions of funders, or to count a certain number of people who repatriated or got housing or were able to access food, or whatever the issues are? There are rigorous means to also, in addition to counting things, to do qualitative assessment. And it's very, very important in the kinds of projects we're talking about to incorporate both approaches. Another thing that's critical is the recognition and validation by members of the community that's being impacted, that's where the project is being implemented, that they are engaged with creation of the evaluation project and in doing parts of the evaluation as well. That helps everyone increase the likelihood of obtaining a certain depth of understanding of change or lack of change that as a result of the initiative that we might not get otherwise.
Great, thank you, Tony. And just a note to the audience, we got word Kiche lost power and he is switching on his generator.
Sorry,
you're back.
Yeah.
Great. Kiche, so Tony just elaborated a bit on the evaluation of arts-based peace building initiatives. So I'm wondering if you had any sort of additional comments from your own perspective on the challenges of evaluation, and also really touching on this idea of what's different when you design an arts-based peacebuilding program.
I caught the tail end of Tony's contribution, and I agree completely. There's a danger that I may say something that he has already said. However, I think one of the biggest differences would be different priorities. Donors, for example, donors to art-based social change initiatives and to peace-building organizations appear to get quite excited about different factors. For example, the art-based programs are actually interested in building communities, just people coming together, and some of the indicators that the donors may have may not really be of that much interest to artists. One of the issues would be, what is a successful project? What is a successful art, culture, and conflict transformation project? For an artist, for example, it may simply be that the fact that people came together and they ate together, that is a big success. For a donor, it might be the donors might be interested, for example, in the cessation of the conflict. And cessation of conflict is something that takes maybe a long time. And because art projects sometimes do not get funded very well, they do not run that long. So the time for investment, I think, is a big difference. Donors have projects that run for maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years if you're lucky. I think for an art project to be really successful, you need longer term investment, maybe 10 years or more. Maybe I would just stop there for now.
Yeah, I think the long-term investment is a really critical thing to make sure that peacebuilding programs and development programs are truly locally owned, so sustained solutions, which allow sustained progress built on sort of incremental gains, as opposed to a 3-year program and then coming back in 10 years and doing another 3-year program. As we have now taken up about 15-20 minutes of the webinar's allotted time, we're now going to open up to input from the audience. A couple of notes about our format for those of you who haven't attended a Thursday Talk before, you're very welcome. But you can submit a question or a comment one of two ways. The first is through the question function on GoToWebinar. The second is to click on the little hand icon, which will raise your hand and unmute your microphone so you can ask your question live. When you do submit your comment question, please submit your name and affiliation. And just a note, these talks are recorded and posted on DME for Peace, so those who are not able to join at this time can go back and listen to the presentation and the discussion and learn from everybody's wider engagement. As you can see on the screen in front of you, we have 3 questions really created by the Impact Project to try and provoke some response from you guys today. First is, do you have questions about or reactions to the opening presentation? The second is, on a scale of 1 to 5, when you think about what comprises excellence in peacebuilding programming that engages the arts, would you place yourself near 1, socio-political concerns most important, or 5, artistic and cultural excellence most important, or somewhere in the middle, and why? And are you aware of evaluations that take both socio-political and aesthetic excellence into account? Can you share any examples of this? Okay, so I'm seeing some of the questions coming through, and we have a comment from Mindy Reiser, who is the Vice President of Global Peace Services USA. And Mindy has asked if the members of the Impact Project, so maybe Keisha or Tony, do you have any success stories that you could share about your work? And I believe you're all muted right now. So Tony or Keisha, would you care to share a success story with the audience?
Hello, sorry, my mic was muted. I've spoken quite a bit. Tony?
Go ahead, Kiche, please.
Okay. Because impact is still in the process of formation, it is still actually the funding of the Mellon Foundation funding is the first funding that Impact got just to come up with an infrastructure, the kind of infrastructure that that Impact would have. So right now, I'm not sure we can start talking about successes. Maybe if this funding is the beginning of a success as a unit, I would call that a success story. But for now, in my opinion, we are still in the stage of formation. I don't know, Tony, if you want to add something to that.
I guess I'm gonna interrupt here just to ask a question of you, Kiche, talking about your own work as sort of arts-based peace building. Could you speak about an example you've seen in a Kenyan context of an arts-based peace building program really having a significant community impact? I think the audience would be really interested to hear how that looks so that they can offer their input.
Oh yeah, that's I've been involved in quite a number of art-based projects which I would consider quite successful. One of them was an art-based project that was a project that was funded by Nike and USAID, and this project was to build the capacity of young women in micro-enterprise, and it was art-based. This project was actually designed to be very exclusive because it only targeted girls between the ages of 14 to 24. And when this project began, for the first phase of the project, the men were excluded completely. But then when we did midterm evaluation, we decided that we convinced the funders that maybe it is a good idea to also involve the men, because really the men are the decision makers in some of these communities. And the art part of this project was using the local artistic forms that are found within the communities to see how you can integrate this in the micro enterprise. Like we used songs, we used dances, we used skits, we used all sorts of local artistic forms that could be integrated in the project. And when the men came, it just blossomed, because the parts, for example, that were being played by the women, the men parts that were being played by the women were taken over by the men, and it was like a community carnival. So the fun part of this project was as much as the economic part of this project. By the end of the 5 years, the project was so successful that the community took it over, and it is running to date. And in my opinion, I think the success of this program is the art part of it, that people are making a living, and they're making a living using artistic forms that they are familiar with in the community. That is one that I would say was very, very successful, and it is still running to date. And it is now not being run by the funders, it is now run by the community themselves. Yeah.
That is a great example. And Tony, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add.
I'll just add briefly that I want to pick up on what Kiche said about the engagement with local artistic forms that resonate with people, that have meaning. Just an example from West Africa, in which the songs, traditional songs, have a kind of moral potency there. And that power, that potency was harnessed by artists on their own, and not coordinated by anyone else, during the civil wars in the 1990s through 2003, and in refugee camps, then also through coordinated efforts on reconciliation and peace building by having artists of ethnic groups that had been that were at war with each other performing together to model ways of communication other than violence. And there are artists who were engaged in those efforts in Liberia and then in refugee camps in neighboring countries who, when they resettled in the United States, decided to harness that same kind of potency within their immigrant communities here, also using traditional song and dance to address violence and reconciliation among ethnic Liberians here in the United States.
Two very interesting and diverse examples. Thank you, guys. I see we have a hand raised from Cindy Cohen. Cindy is also sort of a leader of the Impact Project. So Cindy, your microphone is now live to offer your contribution to the webinar.
Thanks, Jack. And thanks, Tony and Kiche, for getting us off the ground. Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that I was going to offer some examples, but since that's happened, I think maybe it would be really interesting to hear from people in the audience who are familiar with arts and artistic and cultural approaches to peace building, what, like, how you balance those concerns between the artistic quality of things and the socio-political impact. This seems to me like one of the challenges, specifically of evaluating arts and cultural initiatives, is that, you know, certainly there are some initiatives that have goals ahead of time, but a lot of times the most creative and impactful work in the arts happens when in an emerging way, like, you know, there's a creative process and the issues that are to be addressed even emerge from the work together to produce a play, or in the case of a project Kiche was involved in, a international soap opera. And just giving people a space to be creative allowed the key issues of the community to emerge. That's a really kind of hard thing to evaluate. So, and I think that there's obviously some emergent qualities of peace building work inevitably anyway, but I'm curious what people who are listening in think about that question.
Great, thanks, Cindy. We actually have a hand raised from Ines Soria Turner. And Ines, your microphone is now live, so please feel free to make your comment to the community. And I'm not sure your microphone is working, Ines. We can try again in another minute. But yes, so one thing I've been thinking about just listening through this webinar and as I wait for some more hands to raise is communicating the importance of evaluation to arts-based practitioners is actually quite difficult. And I recently I took part in a panel at the Stockholm Forum on hosted by CIPRI, which was discussing the role of monitoring and evaluation and media-based sort of programming. And really what I found that sort of made and sort of resonated with quite a lot of artists was that we are trying to do the best for the communities. We're trying to improve the communities within which we work. So you shouldn't view evaluation as a donor requirement, but you should view it as something which makes your impact more significant and allows you to understand your impact more effective. We have at Search for Common Ground, and these are all available on DME for Peace. We have two guides specifically based on the monitoring and evaluation of arts-based programming. Those include our 3R approach, which is based on reach, resonance, and response. And the second is a guide we produced with UNICEF 2 years ago on participatory theatre for change. And if anybody is interested on today's webinar in accessing those materials and isn't sure where they are, please feel free to reach out to me. We have a question coming through the comment box from Emily Forsyth Queen. And Emily said, Emily is a learning and evaluation consultant currently working with Impact, among others. Emily asks, I'm wondering if there are some ideas about how principles in arts and culture programs can influence the peacebuilding evaluation field to add some additional creativity and grounding in the full range of human expression. I don't know if any of our panelists today, Kiche or Tony, want to to discuss that? And Kiche, I see your microphone is live.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. So Emily asks if there are some ideas about how principals in arts and culture programs can influence the peacebuilding evaluation field to add some additional creativity and grounding in the full range of human expression. And I'm not sure, Emily, I'm not sure if your microphone is working well. Maybe it might be best to have you elaborate online. And your hand is raised, so we're going to unmute your microphone. Emily, you're live.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So, yeah, I'm really thinking about how a lot of the conversation tends to be around how evaluation can serve arts and culture work or arts and culture and peacebuilding work. But I'm also wondering how the arts and culture fields, and not just the principles, but also practices that are involved, can influence the evaluation field, and specifically perhaps the peacebuilding evaluation field. A lot of the just modes and methods that are usually used are pretty standard and related to, just as a simple example, writing and talking as like modes of expression in evaluation. So I'm wondering if there's examples of, or ideas about how to make it more of a two-way street.
Thank you, Emily. And Kiche, I don't know if you want to dive right in there.
Yeah, let me dive in. I'm not totally sure I've understood the question in totality, but I think art, culture, and conflict transformation can also impact a great deal on evaluation processes. For example, in my community, in a lot of Kenyan communities, Emily, I'm based in Kenya, and a lot of Kenyan communities, the idea of art as being separate from culture is really not very clear. Art is culture, culture is art, so it's part of people's life. So when you have a program that has articulated goals that have to be evaluated, it becomes problematic. I think one way of having a two-way traffic is for those who want to evaluate these processes to really get into the cultures of the people and how the arts work within those cultures, so that they can find a way of evaluating it not only from their perspective, but also from the perspective of the people. Of course, there is this big story that everybody seems to be involved in called participatory evaluation, And for me, I think participatory evaluation is more of a talk than a practice, because the idea behind participatory evaluation is that when you go into a project that is based within the community, you involve the community in the monitoring and evaluation of the project. But normally, my experience is that when monitoring and evaluation happens, that participation is really not there. The community is there to follow what the experts, like if you come from Nairobi, if you come from big cities, you are the expert. You go to the community, you are monitoring, your evaluation, the community will follow. So if we can have a honest dialogue between the professional quote unquote evaluators and the community, so that we agree on what is important to be evaluated other than what was predetermined to be evaluated. I am not sure I'm answering your question.
Well, that's a really interesting answer, and I think I'll sort of jump on that a little from the evaluation perspective. I think true participation and making evaluation more accessible, monitoring evaluation more accessible is the goal, but it's not always feasible given the scope of the project, given the level of funding, and it actually takes a huge amount of effort and a huge amount of planning to design participatory approaches to that. What I will say is that there's some really interesting work being done in this space to increase community participation and monitoring and evaluation. At DME for Peace, we hosted a workshop in Cape Town about 18 months ago, connected to breaking barriers to participation and inclusion in evaluation. And that engaged sort of 6 different groups of stakeholders to discuss how we can essentially make evaluation accessible. And then that also builds off the work that's being done right now by the Everyday Peace Indicators project, based out of the University of Manchester, and Roger McGinty and George Mason University and the US Institute of Peace through Pamina Furchow. And what they're doing is working with local communities to identify what indicators and what indicators look like to the local community. For example, one of their case studies, I believe, is in Colombia, and in one community, one of the indicators about security is our dogs barking in the street. But yeah, no, I think you're right, Kiche, but we're moving towards that. We're getting better at it. We just need to move beyond the technical jargon as well. Our next question, our comment, comes from Yannick Lewis, who is the director of the Apakalu Center. And Yannick has asked a question of how can peace builders working on arts-based and creative approaches to conflict transformation better bridge the priorities and expectations of donors and that of their beneficiaries? Is there a need to inform and transform outcomes and indicators associated with these projects to reflect the funding environment and the wider community itself? I don't know if, I know it touches on our most recent point, but I don't know if Kiche or Tony, one of you guys wants to jump in to make a comment here. Okay, you're both muted. Tony, I see you're live.
Yes, I wanted to ask if Kiche can unmute his microphone, because I think he might have some interesting.
Yes, I lost connection for a few seconds there, so I didn't quite get the question.
So Kiche, the question is essentially, how we lost this question? And the question is, how can peace builders working on arts-based and creative approaches to conflict transformation better bridge the priorities and expectations of donors with that of their communities? For example, making sure that the indicators reflect both the funding environment and the communities itself.
Jack, could you take that slow? You're a little too fast for me.
Sorry. And please ask me to repeat again if you don't hear. But Yannick has asked, how can peace builders working on arts-based and creative approaches to conflict transformation better bridge the priorities and expectations of donors with that of their beneficiaries?
Okay. I hear that. Tony, you want to go first?
No, I'm leaving it for you.
That's an interesting question, and that is, I think, part of what impact is about, because the donors are giving these funds really for the benefit of these target communities. That is the primary goal, and for this project, for art, culture, and conflict transformation to be effective, it must create an effective bridge between the donors and the communities. And normally, I would give you an example of a lot of the situations in Kenya. Communities have become very, very smart at guessing what the donors want. So you go to a community, for example, and you have funding for water. The community is living on the size of Lake Victoria. This is like the second largest freshwater lake in the world. So you go, and because you have money to provide water to the community will tell you, yes, water is what we want. So if we could engage art and cultural processes to really have honest dialogue with the communities, so that when the donors come, the communities can genuinely tell them what they want, and this genuine telling also includes saying to the donor, no, what you want to fund is actually not our priority. We need something else. So the donor may fund the something else that the community needs, or the donor may go back with the money, but the communities are not there yet. I think art and cultural program can be a very effective mediation in having a honest dialogue between the donors and the beneficiary communities.
Great, thank you, Kiche. And we have a couple of questions here from Tiffany Ferry, who has asked, what is required to legitimize the field of arts peacebuilding, and how can academic researchers support this process of legitimizing the field of arts peacebuilding?
Impact. Yeah, I mean, we need the kind of infrastructures that impact is part of. Impact is not the first and the last one, but I think we need to legitimize art cultural intervention program. We need to mainstream them because, in my opinion, at the moment, art and cultural intervention programs are on the periphery. So we will, even for evaluation, when we are doing evaluation, we are doing, if it is quantity we are looking for, of course, art and cultural programs, you can hardly quantify what you want to do. So I believe what we need to do is to legitimize the field, and legitimizing the field is going to have many faces, and one of those faces is impact. We want to build this as a legitimate field where you have researchers, where you have artists, where funders deal with a body that is international and they know this is what this body of people do, and we want to have rigor in what we do in implementation of our program, in research, in publication, having journals, having books. We need to really build this as a solid field of conflict transformation and social transformation in general.
Great, thank you, Kiche. I think we're coming up on time today, but we have one last comment / question from Ines Soria Turner, who microphone was muted earlier. But Ines writes, I agree with Emily's point about incorporating arts-based approaches into the evaluation and Kiche's remarks regarding participatory evaluation. I would be interested to know people's thoughts on how we ensure that the evaluation methodologies used don't limit the approaches or the values of the creative approach. A lot of this is about how we avoid limiting the explorative part of artistic processes, which is so central to a success, which has to, by definition, be rooted at some level in the unknown. And Ines is the project manager of Changing the Story, which is a global challenges research project looking at how CSOs working in the arts, heritage, and human rights education can support youth-centered civil society building in post-conflict settings. So yes, guys, I guess we'll round out with one final question for you is how can we ensure that evaluation methodologies don't limit the creativity? Kiche?
Oh, okay. Unfortunately, what I would call the evaluation canons do. The evaluation method that most evaluation methods that are known, that are practiced widely, really limit creativity. For example, if a donor is asking me to prove the impact of an art and culture intervention program by quantifying numbers, I can't do that. Even if I was given 10 years, I can't do that. It is not possible, for example, to quantify tears when you perform a play and you have a number of people in the audience crying. That is impact right there. However, how would you quantify that? It's possible still to have ways of evaluating this kind of impact. One obvious way would be video recording. Just record the reaction of the audience, have a discussion with the audience after that, or try some artistic ways of evaluating the program. For example, if you're performing a play in front of children or even adults, ask them to draw something. They may not be very good at drawing, but they could draw their reactions, how this play or this song has really impacted them. I think what we need to agree on is that, yes, the evaluation canons, what I call the evaluation canons, they're useful. And even art and cultural programs can use them, but they are not the only ways. We need to go beyond them and find other ways we can evaluate the impact of this artistic program, this cultural program, that are beyond the evaluation canon, the evaluation methods that are there. Of course, there are also qualitative evaluation methods. Even some of the qualitative evaluation methods cannot be so effective in evaluating art programs. There are many ways of evaluating art programs that I think we need to mainstream them so that they become part and parcel of the evaluation canons. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kiche. And we're at time today. And I just want to throw it out there. I know there's some ways to engage with the Impact Project moving forward on the screen in front of you right now. But if you have any example of evaluations of arts-based approaches to peace building or reports, evaluations, methodologies, please feel free to share it with me at DME for Peace, and I will transfer that to our colleagues at the Impact Project. Thank you all for joining today. This was a very active webinar, and some of the comments we didn't get to, I'll be sure to add to the recording of this webinar on the DME for Peace Media Gallery. Thank you to the Impact Project as well, to Kiche for persevering through your power issues, and Tony for jumping in when needed. We're going to be back next week with another Thursday Talk webinar as we welcome Engineering for Change, and we're really excited to host a discussion which touches on sort of monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning, but with a tech angle. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and